You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. We're reaching you from our home on the web, WMClive.com, where you can find links to all our online channels, including Ustream and podcast. A few days after each program, you can find a transcript of the show at womensmediacenter.com. Also, tell us what you're thinking. Tweet to hashtag WMC Live or call the comment line 347-903-WMC1. Our guests this week, wow. Patti Chang, co-founder and CEO of Feed the Hunger Foundation, on, among other things, funding, or the lack of it, for women's activism. Shelby Knox, the dynamic young organizer and online activist on, yes, young feminists do exist. Hello. Then, for a double segment, prize-winning Egyptian-American journalist Mona Eltahawy, just hours back from Cairo, to give us her unique perspective in an exclusive report on the Arab uprisings and the youth and women of the region. But first, behind the headlines. When I need perspective, like from election season absurdities, online images from the Hubble telescope always do it for me. I confess I'm not only a former Trekkie, but a follower of real space exploration, including the recent landing of Curiosity on Mars. I know some indignant people will bluster over cost. What about starving babies here on Earth? Starving babies should be fed. It's not another tedious either-or, it's another both-and. The Curiosity mission cost each U.S. citizen the equivalent of one movie ticket. The possible benefits range from new discoveries in geology, technology, communications, electronics, much more, all the way to the chance of discovering traces of life as we know it, or don't, on another planet. Even if there were no such practical benefits, knowledge is a good in its own right. And pursuing knowledge is a good, especially when so many these days seem to be actively pursuing ignorance. And even if acquiring knowledge were unimportant, there's still the most basic reason to explore. It's who we are. Our species crawled out of the cave and now we scramble up off the planet. All of which is a roundabout way of saying that I was excited at the headlines on Curiosity's landing and sending back signals. Even more so now since learning that the rover has for some time been tweeting. And I'm most thrilled at learning how Curiosity became, well, a tweep. It seems that space, not surprisingly, is a women's issue. NASA has an entire project to spotlight their female employees and encourage girls to get involved in the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math. The URL is women.nasa.gov. On Twitter, it's @WomenNASA. But Curiosity's popularity is unique, with a Twitter following of over 1 million. The Facebook page has over 250,000, with a following 43% female, much higher than other NASA pages. The agency hopes, in fact, to convert page clicks into women seeking careers in space. Why such popularity? Well, Curiosity is sassy. The first tweet, for example, was, "I'm way cool, nearly built, and I need a name." And it was a little girl, Clara Ma, 12, who came up with that name, winning a contest. This is not the first rover to tweet, but Curiosity uses pop culture references, quotes song lyrics, tells corny jokes, exclaims, "awesome," and is proficient at Twitter speak, tossing about LOLZ and IMHOZ. What happened? Starting in 2008, when its Twitter feed, @MarsCuriosity, was created, Curiosity has been voiced by 3 women at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, social media manager Veronica McGregor and social media specialists Stephanie L. Smith and Courtney O'Connor. Under their tutelage, Curiosity now likes to converse with others. Science.com reported that 2 days after the landing, comedian Steve Martin jokingly tweeted about launching his own Mars mission. "I sneezed on it before blastoff. I hope that's okay," he tweeted. Curiosity smoothly replied, "Oh, Steve, that's snot okay. We have rules about that," and linked to NASA's protocols on contamination. Here's a sampling of Curiosity's other tweets. "Road trip. Covered 32 meters of open Martian road yesterday. Every long drive needs a soundtrack. Any suggestions?" "Hello, gorgeous. Snap this self-portrait while using my camera." "Yes, I've got a laser beam attached to my head. I'm not ill-tempered. I zapped a rock for science." "Heads up." "No, really. My head's up. Mast deploy successful. I'm looking around, taking navcam image." Look, it may seem a superficial triumph, but women creating and representing the persona of the largest craft ever landed on another world, and doing so with warmth, humor, and a lack of pomposity, well, we've come quite a way from one small step for mankind. As for anthropomorphizing a robot, Smith says, "The cameras make it look like she has eyes. A bodacious chick," yes, she said chick, "on another planet with a rock vaporizing laser on her head." Did you hear that? The rover's 3 mothers confirm it. Curiosity is a girl. Patti Chang is the former president and CEO of the Women's Foundation of California, which funded over 1,100 organizations throughout California as well as internationally. And she also was the president of the San Francisco Commission on the Status of Women. She's been the board chair of the Women's Funding Network and served on the Women's Institute for Leadership Development. And I'm very proud and delighted that she's on the Women's Media Center board and is now the co-founder and the CEO of the Feed the Hunger Foundation. And she's talking with us today from San Francisco. Patti, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Robin, thank you for having me on.
Well, it's very gallant and sisterly of you, because I know that it's 8:30 in the morning there. And to do an interview at 8:30 in the morning is real sisterhood.
Anytime I have the opportunity of speaking with you and about the Women's Media Center is a gift.
Well, thank you. Talk a little bit about I was going to say the new, but relatively new foundation, Feed the Hunger.
Feed the Hunger Foundation was started 4 years ago, and we use microfinance as a tool for really addressing poverty and hunger, particularly with women around the world, as well as domestically in California and Hawaii.
That's fantastic. Because women are the main growers and purveyors and feeders of food in the world. I think it's 80% of the farmers in Africa are women.
Absolutely.
So food is very decidedly a women's issue.
And Robin, it was funny, but what first got us into this field is we attended a microcredit summit in Asia in 2008. And everyone who spoke is talking about how the loans are going to these poor women, how 85% of microfinance is all about women, and yet the people who were speaking were not women. It took me 2 days to find a woman on a panel.
What do you know? Yeah.
Exactly. And I thought, we can do it better.
And you're doing it better. So what kinds of things does the Feed the Hunger Foundation do? Does it do funding? Does it initiate programs?
It's interesting. I actually moved from the grant-making side of life to making loans.
Ah.
And what we do is we partner with organizations that are working in places like Liberia or Nicaragua, widows of the Civil War there, etc. And lo and behold, the organizations that are run by women are having the hardest time attracting loan capital.
What do you know?
What do you know? So we really try to focus where our money goes to supporting those organizations and giving them a bump up so that, yes, later they may receive larger sums of money from other financial institutions or investors.
And of course, women are, correct me if I'm wrong, but women are really good bets for loans. I remember that when microcredit first began, not with Grameen Bank, which got the credit, and Eunice got the Nobel Prize, but with Ella Bhatt from Self-Employed Women's Organization in India. When microcredit began, everybody was astounded because there was a 90% not default rate from these poor women.
Correct. Actually, our default rate internationally is 0.1%.
Wow.
And when women are invested in, no surprise to your listeners, the family benefits.
Of course.
Girls receive more health care. Girls get to go to school. And not in all cases, but women's status is oftentimes elevated in the neighborhood, the community, and the family, and most importantly, within herself.
Of course. It's good work you're doing. Patti, since you've got such a background in philanthropy on the other side of the check, update me a little bit and our listeners on the status of philanthropy for women and women's groups now, because we all know that it's not what it should be. I remember one statistic a while ago that it was something like, statistics, lies and damn statistics, but it was internationally it was something like 2% of all funding, and nationally it was like 8%. I'm sure that they differ, the statistics, but basically women's groups do not get anywhere near parity.
Exactly. There is such a wide disparity between Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and the fact that Girl Scouts still sells cookies, and yet receives so much less in terms of contributions. Whether that figure goes from when all of the women's funds got started, we were probably at 4 to 5% of where philanthropy went to. 30 years later, if we're still quibbling over 10%, even if the number's gone to 12%, anyone has to admit that it's abysmally small. Yeah. And so how do we really look at providing any kind of equity?
Well, you're doing it with loans, with microcredit, at least as a start. We've only got about a minute left, but is there an answer to how we do that, or one of many?
Women are coming more to the forefront of claiming their identity and to claiming their sources or their resources. We're seeing that a little bit more in the political field right now, with women contributing to candidates, etc. We just need to broaden their agenda to know that it has to include other kinds of social services that benefit women and girls. We've
only got a few seconds left, but I know that you want to say something about Hawaii, from whence you come, and I'd love for you to say it.
Hawaii is in a very interesting position right now where we no longer have pineapple or sugarcane. Therefore, what will be happening to the land? What will be happening to our new responsibility where we import 85% of our food while exporting 90% of what we grow? It becomes a perfect microcosm for how we can invest in such a way that will include culture with a new economy.
I want you to run the world, the economy of the world, because I can just begin to fantasize on what a different world it would be. And I'm one of those people who my brain shuts down at the word fiscal. And yet you always make the economy and the issues of economics clear and political, and you unveil them for what they really are, which is deeply political. Thank you so much for being with us, and come back. You promise?
I promise. Tthank you, Robin.
We're going to take a little break now. Meanwhile, let us in on what you're thinking. Call our comment line at 347-903-WMC1. This is Women's Media Center Live, the talk show with a brain. I'm Robin Morgan. Our next guest is the young feminist activist and online organizing expert, Shelby Knox. We'll return in just a sec.
Coming up, young feminism is alive and well. Just ask Shelby Knox, who says people who think young women aren't active in feminism aren't looking in the right place. She joins us next.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Will you be in New York City on the evening of September 24th? You are invited to join WMC Live's Robin Morgan at the Tribeca Performing Arts Center, where she will participate in a forum with 3 Nobel laureates: Shirin Ebadi, a human rights lawyer and the first Muslim woman to receive a Nobel Peace Prize; Lima Bowie, an inspiring Liberian activist honored with the Nobel Prize for organizing women across ethnic and religious divides to force a violent warlord into exile and to pave the way for the election of Africa's first female head of state; and Jody Williams, an American peace activist who received the Nobel Peace Prize for her work to ban landmines. The evening offers a conversation with Nobel laureates and activists at the forefront of the campaign to stop rape and conflict. Lauren Wolf, director of WMC's Women Under Siege project, will moderate the conversation. To RSVP or for more information, email wmcnobel@womensmediacenter.com.
And our next guest is Shelby Knox, who many of you may know as the central character, the star of the film The Education of Shelby Knox, about her childhood as in the home of evangelical Christians, and her fight, this was in Texas yet, and her fight to get comprehensive sex education in school, and her escape from those circumstances, and her coming to New York and becoming a real dynamo of a feminist leader of young women, and probably the best online organizer I've ever met, working with Change.org, and all sorts of other deeply feminist, activist, good things. So welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you for having me, Robin.
Well, thank you for letting me have you, Shelby. So let's engage immediately on the issue of the media still claiming that young feminists don't exist, which makes me think I hallucinate a lot. And how do you not gnash your teeth about that all the time?
I do gnash my teeth about it all the time, but I try to remember that the media, as much as we have done to reform it, is still controlled by the pale males who have a vested interest in saying that feminism is dead, because they are still terrified of this movement that will radically change how people get information in this country. So young feminists are there. Perhaps people are not looking in the right places. There is an entire blogosphere of young women writing about their fabulous activism, and we truly use that as our consciousness-raising groups. Yeah. It's where we discover that we're feminist, that we're not alone, we're not crazy. And they're not on Twitter. They're not looking at the campaigns that young women are waging using social media and tools like Change.org. And anyone who tells me that young women aren't feminist, or enough of them aren't feminist, I'd like for them to look at the world that we live in. The scariest thing for my generation is we've been told we're equal. And so when things happen to us, we think it's our own personal problem. It must be my fault. And only when we come together and share our stories, as throughout the history of feminism, do we realize that we're not alone, and this is a larger problem called sexism.
And you have the You Too moment.
Yes, Yeah. And so we live in this world that tells us that, we're alone. And so the fact that so many young women do identify as feminist, in fact, a study in 2007 said more young women identify as feminist than those of your generation, the women's liberation movement. So,
I'm not at all surprised. I mean, you know that they told us in the late 1960s, before I did a Miss America pageant, that we were doomed to fail because we were only a handful of young women, and because older women weren't involved and neighborhood women weren't involved. Flash forward, and the wisdom now, the conventional wisdom is you're doomed to fail because you're only older women, younger women are not. And this has been true in every country cross-culturally, and it's a lot of bull, frankly, in all meanings of the term. I've learned more from young women lately than I have from some of my contemporaries, many of my contemporaries, you among the young women. And partly I think it's that people don't necessarily look on the magical interweb, but also there's a blindness to it. It's feminism takes different forms, and the issues change, and they should change. To me, the most exciting thing about you and your generation is that you have a sense of entitlement that we didn't, and that I just am ecstatic to see. It's like what do you mean I can't?
Yes. I think that, we have a more sensitive bullshit meter.
Good.
And that we have all of these tools also that, okay, the mainstream media doesn't want to recognize us, doesn't want to talk about our work. We'll make our own media, which of course is something the Women's Media Center has supported. But I mean, speaking of my friendship with you, the media also wants to say that the generations are incredibly divided, that there's intergenerational catfighting. And I've never known that to be the case in my
Our first
experience.
show, we had Emma Axelrod on, which of course, and she was one of the teenagers who did the petition, one of your girls, through change.org.
Yes.
And then we did a show with Aria Levy, and they're total media myths. I think it's important for my generation to be as respectful, not always the case, of young feminists as we are of each other and ourselves, in the way that you would cross-culturally with other women. But the idea that there aren't strong friendships and give and take of learning is, as you say, bullshit.
Yes. I also think it's incredibly important for young feminists to know our history so that we don't continually reinvent the wheel. And I also don't think that we should expect one-sided respect or promotion from the older generation. It is just as much a young woman's responsibility to take an older woman that she wants to know out to dinner and ask her questions and become friends. I think that's a problem, is that young feminists think that maybe we can't be friends with the older feminists, but we definitely should, because that's the basis of a great working relationship.
Or they think that they'll be dissed, or they think that they'll be patronized, and sometimes that's been the case, And I think it needs to be heaved out of the mother-daughter model and into a sister model.
Yes, it's incredibly harmful that we put these labels, mother-daughter, granddaughter, on relationships when, in fact, even across what they call the waves, I am much more similar in my activism and ideology to some of the second wave than I am to anyone in the third wave.
Yeah, and the wave, I have, as you know, a problem with the wave terminology anyway. I love this group called the permanent wave.
Yes.
Because all I think is, the second wave came about because Kate Millett one night, having a wonderful bottle of wine, was harangued by Time magazine into, what do you call this? What do you call this? And she said, well, I guess suffrage was the first and this is the second wave. And it's not. It's more like the 10,000th wave.
It is, although I've been speaking a lot about the fourth wave, FORTH.
Oh, that's cool.
Movements have to move forward. And also, I think that one of the things the media does to us is if we don't label ourselves,
they will.
And they also will miss an important part of history, that is these young women using the internet and their community connections to do amazing radical work for gender justice.
Say some of those things, because also people worry, I think, sometimes that there's cocooning on the internet and that it doesn't move off the internet into the streets.
So there's a great petition right now by 3 teenage girls who are asking Teen Vogue to stop photoshopping and feature more diverse women in their magazine. You can sign that at www.change.org/Teen Vogue. And one of the coolest things I heard recently was Texas, my home state, passed a law that said doctors have to lie to patients getting abortions. They have to listen to this whole speech about how abortion causes breast cancer and could cause suicide. And so these young women in Texas were like, what if you could listen to an iPod while they said that, so you didn't have to hear that. And so they started a drive online for money to buy iPods to give to these clinics so that women don't have to hear the bullshit that the
So they just put the earbuds in.
So they just put the earbuds in.
See, that's very smart. It's just and it's using the technology as an organizing tool.
Definitely. And the money was raised online via feminists from all over the world.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. And you're at the red hot center of this because you're at change.org, and you do all the women stuff.
Yes, I do. And the coolest thing about change.org to me is that many mainstream organizations want to find a problem from the top and then implement a top-down solution.
Yeah.
At change.org, anyone, anywhere can come and start a petition about the issues that they care about. Mm-hmm. That means that there's no organizer deciding what a marginalized community needs and then going on and doing more harm than good. It means that the people themselves are waging online campaigns for justice.
This is the dynamite. When we only have about 30 seconds, what is next for you, for Shelby Knox?
I have a never-ending dream to write a book about my travels across the country. I've been doing it since I was 15 and have met literally hundreds of amazing young women who are doing smart, diverse, innovative gender justice work. And I'm incredibly passionate about women's history, and we are living it and making it every single day, and that needs to be out there.
So we have to get this book written because we need this book.
Yes.
All right.
Help me.
And I will help you. And you have the pledge in front of witnesses. Thanks so much for being on Women's Media Center Live, and you have to come back many times. You promise?
Yes, ma'am.
And you can follow her also on Twitter and on Facebook and on everywhere that you can find Shelby Knox.
Yes. And please tweet with WMC Live. This is one of my favorite new shows. So smart, fun, witty. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. And now for verbal karate. The surprise, words really do mean things, chop. These are some hot-button words, especially in election season. This feature, by the way, is based on the work of Rosalie Maggio, the wordsmith author of numerous anti-sexist and anti-racist language books, who is currently collaborating with the WMC on a book to be called Unspinning the Spin. Anyway, here are 3 hot-button election year phrases. Watch for them. First, alternative lifestyle, which is usually used to refer to sexual orientation or preference, but this term implies that there is a lifestyle to which one can be alternative. People don't have lifestyles, people have lives. Although it could be said that people who have special elevators for their cars lead alternative lifestyles. Second, family values. Well, you know this one. This is political shorthand for a rigid picture of a patriarchal family, a male breadwinner and a full-time female homemaker and a decent income and 2.5 children. I always wondered what that half-child was. And a Cocker Spaniel and a picket fence. No divorces, no blended families, no homosexuality, no unwed or single parents, no real life. Author Suzanne Braun-Levine has written, understanding that families do not need values imposed on them, but value accorded them, has been the agenda of the U.S. feminist movement for 150 years. She's absolutely right. The people who use family values as a phrase are the same ones who vote down bills that support health care or education or put food on the table or improve workplace friendliness to families. Any bills that establish other social systems essential to the well-being of the family. And the last phrase to watch out for is judicial activists or judicial activism. In contrast to strict constructionists who are, in a sense, fundamentalists, interpreting the letter of the Constitution regardless of whether 18th century applications to the modern world are valid, in contrast to that, judicial activists try to understand the spirit of the Constitution in terms of our needs today. Issues such as reproductive rights, affirmative action, discrimination, consumer protections, all these didn't exist when the Constitution was written. Conservatives, as you may have gathered, don't much like judicial activists, and progressives don't much like strict constructionists. Though I could argue that a Supreme Court decision like Citizens United was an example of conservative judicial activism. As for hewing to fossilized 18th century law instead of modern interpretation, here's Thomas Jefferson on the Constitution. Quote, Laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as new discoveries are made, new truths disclosed, and manners and opinions change with a change of circumstances, institutions must advance also, and keep pace with the times." Close quote. That is inscribed at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. Psst. Shh. Jefferson was a judicial activist. It's time for another pause, so the tweeps among you can comment to us at #WMC Live. This is Robin Morgan on Women's Media Center Live, coming to you from WMCLive.com. We'll be back with Verbal Karate and with award-winning Egyptian-American journalist Mona Eltahawy, just back from Cairo with an exclusive report. So stay right where you are.
Egyptian-American journalist Mona Eltahawy has just returned from the Middle East, where violence erupted last week in Libya after an American-made video surfaced depicting the Prophet Muhammad as a womanizer. The violence resulted in the death of an American ambassador and 3 others, as protests spread to 20 countries, including Egypt. Were Egyptian women involved? Mona answers this question when she joins us next.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Will you be in New York City on Thursday, September 27th? The Women's Media Center co-hosts Great Debates, Why They Matter, and What is at Stake. Featuring Barbara Walters, a presidential debate moderator in 1976 and 1984, and Carol Simpson, a presidential moderator in 1992, Bill Wheatley, executive producer at NBC News, Dr. Mina Bose, director of Hofstra's Peter Kalikow Center for the Study of the American Presidency, and Caitlin Thompson, director of online political coverage at WNYC. Great Debates is sponsored by the Paley Center for the Media and the DuPont Columbia Awards in association with the Women's Media Center and the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. For more information and to purchase tickets, contact events@womensmediacenter.com.
This week we have a News You Can Use item. Quite terrific. Hundreds of prominent women working in science, technology, engineering, and math, otherwise known as STEM, S-T-E-M fields, are going to be online mentors for college students in those fields, or considering those fields, during October. It's a massive open online course with the goal of connecting students with accomplished women already working in STEM fields. Prominent universities from the California Institute of Technology and Cornell and Harvard and MIT, you name it, have signed on, contributing mentors and publicizing the program to students. While women now earn more college degrees than men overall, we lag in STEM fields, particularly computer science and engineering, where we earn less than 20% of all undergrad degrees. So to help raise those numbers, the program has lined up prominent women like Mae Jemison, the first African-American female astronaut, and nearly 300 other mentors. It's amazing, the program. You can find it at Women in Technology Sharing Online, or WITSON, WITSON. It's a great idea. Mona Eltahawy is an Egyptian-American feminist, brilliant journalist and pal. She was a correspondent for Reuters in Cairo and Jerusalem. She has reported, and still does, from the Middle East for The Guardian in the UK. She has written for U.S. News and World Report. She writes essays and op-eds for publications around the world on Egypt and the region and the Islamic world, and with a particular focus on, women's status. And her work has appeared in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Christian Science Monitor, and lots of really highly respectable, wonderful journalistic places. And she is a force majeure And she is here with me today, fresh from the plane, landing from Cairo. Are your jets still lagging?
Very much so.
Yes. I nabbed her because she's just back from Cairo, where you were, for 2-3 months?
No, I was in Cairo for almost a month.
For almost a month. It's to your friends, it seems much longer.
Oh, I've been back and forth, though, so it's been a big chunk of time.
So you were there when all the latest exploded. I know you went there to work with the women's groups and in the post-uprising. Tell what you've been doing.
I've been going back for various reasons. I've been going back for personal reasons because I wanted to show the military, which was behind an attack on me in November, that I would not be deterred from going back to my country of birth. I also wanted to go back to work with feminist groups on the ground there because I'm soon launching a national campaign against sexual violence. And I'm also gearing up to write a book that's based on an essay I wrote about the terrible violations of women's rights in the Middle East and North Africa.
Yeah, don't do only one thing at a time, Mona. You're the original multitasker. Yeah.
I try my best.
Yes, yeah, you succeed pretty well. When things exploded over this asinine video that these troublemaking, crazy Christians did in California, I think. How did that impact on women? Were women involved? What's gone down in terms of that?
I think what you saw clearly happening in Cairo was a right-wing respond to a right-wing, and a very fringe right-wing on both sides.
Interesting. And
whenever two very right-wing fringes respond, and especially if they're religiously motivated in any shape or form, women are never part of the equation. In fact, it's usually an alarm bell to women and those of us who care about liberties generally, but especially for those of us who identify as feminists, because when I look at the right-wing groups in Egypt responding to this, unbelievably amateurish film that had been on YouTube for at least 2 months, I think it was, and was just picked up just in time for a protest, again, nicely timed to the September 11th anniversary.
How convenient.
Exactly, outside of the US Embassy, which had nothing to do with the film. You recognize that it's two very fringe right wings talking to each other above the heads of the rest of us and wanting to hijack a very, very sensitive and a very special moment in time called our revolution.
Interesting. I had this, my PQ is fairly high, my paranoid quotient, and I did have this fantasy that the generals and even the Muslim Brotherhood, in other words, the right wing in Egypt, were in some kind of crazy conspiracy with the crazy Christians who made the video, because they supply each other with the flint to strike the flame. And the folks in the middle who are trying for democracy, for equality, for sanity, really are the losers.
Absolutely, Robin. I mean, I'm not a great conspiracy theorist or fan of conspiracy
me neither, usually.
Right. But there are moments where you really just have to wonder who is benefiting from this and who is behind this. And there were so many unanswered questions as we watched these horrendous events unfold, not just in Egypt, but in Libya, where the ambassador and 3 staffers were killed. And then, 3 days later, when 14 Muslims were killed in clashes with fellow Muslims over this ridiculous film that no one would ever have watched unless the right-wing groups managed to provoke each other. And then, in Egypt, not just in Egypt, in all the countries where we're having revolutions that continue, because none of them have really been completed yet, we spent almost 2 years trying to change a terrible stereotype of us as these crazies, as these irrational, angry people. And I think we managed to succeed because we'd point to revolutions and say, look, you see, we chose the peaceful way. We didn't choose Al-Qaeda way.
That's right.
And who steps into this? The Al-Qaeda types, the violent types, to say, here we are now. And so all this work of almost 2 years in just 3 or 4 days was almost ruined. And in Egypt, when we're discussing a constitution, and we have really right-wing, rabidly anti-women and rabidly anti-freedom men writing a constitution, it's a very sensitive time, and also we don't want the return of emergency law. But when you see this chaos outside the American embassy, of course you begin to hear our justice minister, who was at one time a respected judge, talk about the possible resumption of emergency law. So again, it's only the right wing that benefits from these events.
You said to me when you just arrived that you were tired of being a cleaner. in that the crazies undo all the work that you and people like you have done to bust up the stereotypes of Muslims and the Muslim world. And do you know about the campaign on Twitter, which is, I think, witty and absolutely wonderful, and clearly it's spontaneous, and young people sort of, its hashtag is Muslim Rage.
Yes, I saw that in response to the crazy Newsweek cover.
It's so witty, yes. Because a tweet will be, took my laundry to the laundromat at Muslim Rage. My mother got furious with me because I ate the top of the cupcake off at Muslim Rage. I mean, it's an ongoing campaign of we're hello, we're human, we're normal, we're people, we're like you. Dare you recognize our humanity? And it's all under Muslim Rage.
Right. Oh, absolutely. This is exactly what the revolutions were all about. That it was watching men and women and children, in many cases, to join them in public squares and in public areas and spaces where they had been denied the ability to express anything.
Yes.
Telling their regimes and any allies who supported these regimes against our freedoms that we too deserve these freedoms. Yes. And in the space of 3 or 4 days, you have these people who had nothing to do with the revolution, whose space was opened up by our revolution.
Co-opting it.
Exactly, and wanting to derail it. And so those of us who've worked so hard, especially those of us who move between these various worlds, those of us who move between the so-called East and the so-called West, which I don't believe exist, yes. Those of us who move between, say, the US and Egypt or the Middle East and North Africa, who for such a long time have been saying, we're the ones who will bring about freedom and change, not Al-Qaeda and not Osama bin Laden, not the violent types. We're the cleaners.
Yes.
And after, we're like the Harvey Keitel character in Pulp Fiction, where after someone is gruesomely murdered, Harvey Keitel steps in to clean up. And so I've gotten to the stage, and we do this, and I go on various TVs and radio stations, and I'm happy to do it because I care deeply about these revolutions. I go on and I do this, the revolution is about us. The revolution is not about the right wing in the US or the right wing in the Middle East or North Africa.
Right.
And then the very next day, I am cursed and called a disgrace to Islam by the right wing, or I'm called a crazy jihadi by the right wing in the US. So I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't.
Of course you are.
But I'll be damned if any of them silence me, or try to silence me, because these revolutions will not be derailed by people who care nothing for freedom. We will win, not them.
You're going to outlast them, for one thing. And besides, you have the virtue of having truth, on your side, as well as the thirst for something better,
Absolutely.
The real hunger. I was having this argument with somebody the other day about why are Muslims so easily insulted, and I didn't know where to begin, but I came across an extremely good list, which is just a little beginning of a list. Well, just in recent years, the invasion of Iraq as a discredited pretext, the images of abuse from Abu Ghraib prison, the burning and desecrations of the Quran by troops in Afghanistan and a pastor in Florida, detentions without trial in Guantanamo Bay, the denial of visas to prominent Muslim intellectuals, the deaths of Muslim civilians as collateral damage in drone strikes, and even political campaigns against the specter of Islamic law, Sharia law in the United States, which was completely specious. So those are just for starters that would be perfectly understandable causes for being a little cranky, but the concept of Muslim rage, as in King Kong raging through is racist, is and as you say, suits only the right wings of various countries. Absolutely. On all sides.
It's utterly unrepresentative, and also, and I'm glad to hear that list, because there is a moment at which we must recognize that injustices have been committed.
Yes.
But as a Muslim and as someone from that part of the world, from the Middle East and North Africa, from the various Islamic worlds that exist, I also have to add that many of our dictators, who were supported by various US administrations and by various European governments, were very happy to use legitimate anger and offense at those things as a way to distract from their own injustices.
Yes.
So we also have to position ourselves in the middle of so many people using these injustices for political gain and manipulation. And I like to refer to the First Amendment, because as an Egyptian American, I love the First Amendment when I'm in the United States, because the First Amendment gives me the right to freedom of expression, the right to worship, the right to offend, and the right to protest offense.
Pretty good.
But it's wonderful.
Yeah.
But as an Egyptian, I know that 5 U.S. administrations, which hold that First Amendment holy, were happy to support a dictator who denied us those same freedoms in Egypt. So my goal for Egypt is to have a First Amendment, to have a constitution and a Bill of Rights that guarantees everybody's rights in the way that everybody's rights are guaranteed here. I believe in the freedom to offend. Offend all you want, but I also believe in the freedom to peacefully protest that offense. That's what I want our revolution to bring about.
Oh, wow, that's a real revolution. Stick around. We're going to come back and do another segment, yes?
Yes.
All right. We'll take another short break here. You're listening to Women's Media Center Live, the talk show with a brain, via WMCLive.com, our home on the web. We'll return in just a moment with more of Mona Eltahawy's insights into the real Middle East. Don't you budge.
Stay tuned. More with Mona Eltahawy, who talks passionately about the campaign to stop sexual harassment in Egypt, and her upcoming book, Headscarves and Hymens, which explores the hatred against women in the Middle East and Africa.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Will you be in New York City on November 13th? The Women's Media Center Awards celebrate Pat Mitchell, the president and CEO of the Paley Center for Women, Martha Nelson, editorial director of Time Inc., Laura Ling, correspondent for Current TV and vice president of Vanguard Journalism Unit, Lisa Ling, host of Oprah Winfrey Network's Our America with Lisa Ling, and Sarah Hoy, all-platform journalist at CNN. To buy tickets and sponsorships to the awards, please contact Media Awards at womensmediacenter.com. Will you be in the San Francisco Bay Area on October 19th? Please join Carol Jenkins, the founding president of the Women's Media Center, at the Bioneers Conference in San Rafael on the morning of October 19th, where she discusses media failures and solutions on race, class, gender, faith, and politics. On the afternoon of October 19th, Carol joins Jody Evans, chair of the board of the Women's Media Center, Amy Allison, co-executive director of Roots Action, and Rose Aguilar, host of Your Call on KALW 91.7 FM, and a panel about changing the stories that create culture and how we tell our own stories. For more information, visit conference.bioneersgroup.com.
We're back with Mona Eltahawy, the Egyptian-American journalist, feminist, wonderful troublemaker person. Tell us about what the work you've been doing on sexual harassment in Egypt.
One of the things that I hope to do when I return to Cairo, because I'm moving back from New York to Cairo, is to work with all the fantastic feminist groups on the ground and human rights activists who, for a long time now, have been fighting against street sexual harassment and sexual violence of all kinds. One of the best campaigns that I'm a huge fan of is called HarassMap. And what HarassMap does is it uses a crowdsourced platform developed by a group called Ushahidi in Kenya, which I think means witness or to bear witness. And,
yes,
and what it does is that it encourages women who have been harassed or sexually assaulted in any way on the streets of Cairo to text message or call or send a Facebook message or tweet to the HarassMap campaign. And what they do then is they put this red spot on a map of Cairo, and you click on the red spot and then you read the testimony of the woman who has reported.
Excellent.
And what it does, it basically shows you kind of like the hot areas so that you know which areas are particularly bad, but it's also a way of collecting documents and holding authorities accountable so that when the group goes to legislators, when we have a parliament again, or when it goes to the police or law enforcement, it can say to them, look how many cases we document. That just shows you that the police aren't taking this seriously, and it shows you that we need a much stronger law enforced, and you need to take women seriously when they make these complaints.
Wow. And when you and I last talked about the state of the women's movement per se in Egypt post the first uprising, I don't call it Arab Spring anymore. It's not a season; it's a climate. But you were concerned because the groups were in schism. They weren't necessarily working together, which is understandable because there has hardly been a lot of time to practice under dictatorship. What is the state now? Are people beginning to reach across and coalesce, or what?
I think we've reached a stage in Egypt where people understand that with a president from the Muslim Brotherhood movement and a still very powerful military, we're caught between a very bad rock and a very horrible hard place.
Yes.
Because you're talking about two sides of one coin, authoritarian, totalitarian, doesn't believe in civil liberties, and for whom and for which women's rights are absolutely at the bottom of any totem pole or hierarchy.
Yeah.
And one of the highlights of my last visit to Cairo was attending a meeting that veteran feminist Mona Eltahawy called, in which she brought together various feminist groups, women and men, who are interested in focusing on women's rights at this very, very sensitive stage in Egyptian history. We still don't have a constitution and we don't have a parliament. And the constitution is currently being written by a group, mostly men, who I would not hesitate to call misogynists, many of whom actually believe it's okay for a girl who's only 9 to marry, and many of whom are not concerned with women's rights at all. So we recognize that this is a very sensitive time, and if we don't jump on this, it will jump on us. And so Mona Eltahawy is trying to coordinate all the various groups on the ground into an initiative, but I know her initiative is one of at least 3. So I think women's rights activists are looking around now saying, okay, look, there are so many of us, we're doing very similar work, let's get together because we need that power of us together to fight against this misogyny, to fight against this hatred of women, to fight against the military and the fundamentalist movement for whom women's rights are not a priority.
And also so that no one group has to reinvent the light bulb because it doesn't know what another group is doing.
Exactly. There's so much fantastic work going on. There's no need to duplicate what other people are doing. Let's just get together. You know, one of the most touching moments in that night was when a senior citizen got up and she had her walking stick with her and she said, look, I want you guys to help me go out there and protest because I want to protest with you. But I need help here because I want to know when I can come out, and I want to know that you young kids out there can actually protect me so that if they attack our protest, I can stay standing and not have to be knocked over or be hurt. So can we coordinate this, please? And so everyone looked around and said, yes, we must.
That's very cool. I need some of these people. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to need exactly the same. Tell a little bit about, which I find especially exciting, the book that I can't wait to read, that I can't wait to help promote, say. I'm very excited about this.
I have such bad attention deficit disorder that I have managed to put off writing a book for years and years, but now I think finally I'm about to burst, so I must. So I'm writing a book that is based on an essay I wrote a few months ago called Why Do They Hate Us? And this essay caused a huge ruckus because the point that I was making is that a lot of the misogyny that we experience as women in the Middle East and North Africa is driven by sheer hatred for women.
Yes.
Clearly, and obviously this isn't just limited to that region or that part of the world.
You think?
It's global, I'm sure, but that's where I come from, and so that's the region that I can most talk about. So I want to write a book that I'm determined to call Headscarves and Hymens.
Headscarves and Hymens.
Headscarves and Hymens because it's
You're such a wimp. You just don't take risks. What a pity. If you only had a spine, Mona.
I'm trying to provoke Robin. Let's see how far I can go with this. No, it's my contention that for women in the Middle East and North Africa, we've come to a point where it's all about what's on our heads, the headscarves, and what's in between our legs, the hymens. So whether you're talking about female genital mutilation or the so-called virginity tests, i.e. sexual assault and rape enacted upon female revolutionaries in Egypt by the military, it really is about headscarves and hymens. And one of those women who survived these horrendous virginity tests and sued the Egyptian military, a young woman called Samira Ibrahim, she told a great story during this meeting that Mona Eltahawy called. She said, listen people, we need to get working women in these meetings because I know this woman who was selling vegetables, she was selling arugula somewhere, and this Islamist came up to her and said, woman, you're not covered properly. And you know what she did? She took off her blouse and said, how do you like me now? So those are the kind of stories that I want to document, but also the kind of violations that we have to recognize. But, also one of the things what my book wants to do is to say that we have to identify as feminists. The time where all of these amazing young women who are saying, no, it's not about women's rights, it's about everyone's rights. I understand that. But we're at a critical moment in our history, in the region. And the way we fight it is by identifying it as such. We are feminists, and we draw upon this wonderful history of Mona Eltahawy, of Doré Shafi, who invaded the Egyptian parliament with 1,500 women in the 50s, of Hoda Sha'arawi, who in 1923 removed her face
off
veil.
her veil, yes.
We're feminists, and we're here, and we're fighting.
Yeah, I think it's the most important front there is in the global women's movement is what women are doing in the Middle East, and the most courageous and the most just important for all of us, because if it can be done there, it can be done everywhere. And it also, if we are not for us, then who is? It doesn't mean that we've been saying, some of us, for 40 years, it isn't about excluding men, but it is about, for once, focusing on women who, happen to be the majority of the species.
Yeah, and without that social revolution that is driven by women's rights, the political revolution will fail.
Exactly.
Because these are revolutions against patriarchy.
Yeah, and you can't have democracy with only half the people.
Absolutely.
So I'm so glad you're back. I already have separation anxiety for when you go again. Moving there really panics me. You're moving there. My moving there would really panic me, too. But we'll have to make the most of it while you're here. And thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for everything you do. But thank you also for coming here today to be with Women's Media Center Live.
Robin, thank you for your inspiration and encouragement. And I will be back, I promise you, for regular visits.
You better. And now it's time for Fighting Words. A few more points on science. Despite forces in this world and this country that would return us all, women first, gallantly, to the Dark Ages, we cannot let them succeed. Here's what terrifies them. This is the greatest age of scientific discovery in recorded history, and you can bet that that's what will be remembered about our times in 1,000 years, if we let ourselves and the planet make it that long. The decoding of the genome, the probable discovery of the Higgs boson particle, the landing of Curiosity on Mars. What will identify our era is not the Kardashian sisters, or the wars, or the recession, not even the presidential election. After all, when we think about Italy in the late 1500s, do we mull over the papal court intrigues that influenced Pope Urban VIII? No, we think Galileo. I don't know about you, but lately I've been trying, in the midst of all the babble, my own as well as other people's, to notice more. The wonders of science that nullify the need for miracles because they are miracles. The way that today's mysteries and magic are tomorrow's clarity and science. But also noticing other things. The simple joy of standing up and sitting down. How good sleepiness feels. People's faces. The passage of seasons that bestows a planetary consciousness. Which reminds me, yesterday was the autumnal equinox. At least it was here in the blue planet's northern hemisphere. It was the spring equinox, of course, in the southern hemisphere. And ever since I spent time years ago in the Antipodes, New Zealand and Australia, that simultaneous reversal always stays with me. As the leaves here crisp crimson and gold, and then break free and sail the cool wind toward winter, the leaves there unfurl a pale greenness and buds swell with spring promise. It's never fully fall or spring for me because of that shimmer of simultaneity between the two. It's never fully the longest night of the year at the northern winter solstice because that's also resonating as the longest day of the year at the southern summer solstice. It's one planet. It's a synchronicity of balance that's a good reminder that what we experience is not necessarily the only reality, of how there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophies. So I love and vow to defend science because it's our key to unlocking just what they are. That's it for this week. Leave us a comment on 347-903-WMC1, and on Twitter, #WMC Live. Our home on the web is WMClive.com, where you can find links to all our online channels, including Ustream and podcast. And a few days after each program, you can find a transcript of the show at womensmediacenter.com. Portions of this program were taped earlier. The views expressed in the commentaries and interviews do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams-Chancellor, Producer Online Director Michelle Kinsey-Bruns, and Production Assistant Nora Eakin. Thank you for listening. I'm Robin Morgan, hoping that your equinox continues lovely and that your life reflects that balance, and that you join us next week on Women's Media Center Live.
Women's Media Center Live is brought to you by Regina Kulik-Scully, our superwoman for women in media. You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.